let's talk about the aid package. So tomorrow there's supposed to be a vote on a $106 billion aid package. It's bundled together. Part of that aid package is $61.5 billion in aid to Ukraine, which is starting to become a sticking point with certain American congresspeople. Now, let me be clear. The majority of American congresspeople, the majority of American senators, the majority of those elected to office still support aid to Ukraine. The majority of the American public, or at the very least a plurality, but the last time I checked, the majority of the American public still supported aid to Ukraine, and the president still supports aid to Ukraine. But there has been problems because there is a certain section of the Republican Party which has grown steadily over time that has concerns about the aid we're sending over, or is just completely opposed to the aid we're sending over. This opposition could be for any number of reasons. For, I think, some of the farthest fringe, it might be that they sympathize with some of the Russian propaganda. I think for people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's definitely the case when she is making statements on news networks that the Ukrainians are like taking the organs out of dead babies to sell for the war effort. I think for others, it's a fiscal conservative issue where they believe that we shouldn't be spending our money wastefully on foreign wars. I would say that it is interesting to see so many different career Republicans that would vote for military funding for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to $8 trillion projects, one of which we completely pulled out of and abandoned for the collapse of Afghanistan to the Taliban, when we've spent $75 billion on military aid to Ukraine, most of which is from what's already in our reserves, already produced from like 40, 50 years ago, old style Vietnam era troop carriers. And this is the like unfiscally conservative, this is the irresponsible spending we're engaging in. But one of the reasons is fiscal conservatism, the idea that if we continue to support Ukraine, there will be a price tag attached to it. There are others that have showed some concerns about things like escalation, but fiscal conservatism seems to be one of the main pitches. There is a few people who are worried about escalation, but that seems to be the majority of the opposition from within the Republican Party. But that had never grown to be large enough to be the majority of the House, the majority of the Senate, or the presidency, because, you know, presidency is controlled by Joe Biden. But there were enough of these people who were opposed to Ukraine aid that they could hold the House Speaker hostage, and they could hold the House Speaker hostage because the House Speaker only had a Republican majority by a few votes, and it wouldn't take many people for a recall vote to be declared, which is what happened to Kevin McCarthy and sunk his chances. So if you're maybe one of 15 dedicated anti-Ukraine aid Republicans, and your position isn't popular with the majority of congresspeople, what you could do is try to hold Mike Johnson hostage, who is the House Speaker, and say, hey, if you hold a vote on Ukraine aid, then maybe we'll hold a vote on you no longer being House Speaker anymore. Or, hey, if you get Ukraine aid through without giving us some big concession or some big thing attached to it, then maybe we will call a recall vote, or we will do this to stop you, or make it this, or make this problem for you. And so that seems to be one of the main issues that Mike Johnson is running into. Now, the reason I lean towards that being my explanation, more than principled opposition, is because I've seen Mike Johnson kind of wiggle around on this issue. Originally, he was in favor of aid to Ukraine, then he flipped or started to oppose aid to Ukraine before then becoming House Speaker, and then he flipped again. He was like, actually, I'm in favor of Ukraine aid now. I'm the House Speaker, so I'm all on board for the Ukraine aid train. But it has to be responsible. It has to be, we need to have clear priorities, things like that. And now it's, well, we need to attach it to border funding. And then we're going to get into that in a moment. But in preparation for the vote on this aid that was supposed to happen tomorrow, Zelensky wanted to try to break up this gridlock by having a classified briefing with the United States senators that are going to be voting on it tomorrow. But this was canceled last second. And we don't know exactly why. Now, this could be for any number of things. It could be Zelensky had some security crisis back home. Let's say maybe there was some break in the front, or there was some maybe really good news on the front and he had to be called away. Could be some bombing, could be anything like that. Or it could be what other people have started to speculate, statements like this from Mitch McConnell, which has been one of the more diehard Republican supporters of Ukraine aid in the Senate.
Nobody on the Republican side in the Senate has been more enthusiastically supporting the idea of a comprehensive supplemental that deals with Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. We want that to pass. But while we're talking about borders, my advice to the majority leader last week was, if you don't believe how serious we are about this, then file cloture. And so I'm advocating, and I hope all of our members vote no on the motion to proceed to the shell, to make the point, hopefully for the final time, that we insist on meaningful changes to the border. James Lankford I designated to be the lead on this, but we've had a number of members who have been involved in it over the years without much success. Now is the time to pay attention to our own border, in addition to these other important international concerns.
So the premise that is being put forward by Mitch McConnell, and it's not just Mitch McConnell either. Mitt Romney pushed this forward too, another Republican that is ostensibly pro-Ukraine aid, or has been up to very recently. One that's also on his way out. I want to put that out there. So I would say that the political concerns for him would be lesser than somebody who's planning to stay in the Senate for quite a while, who's not planning to not run for re-election. He was in lockstep and key with this as well, saying that the border has to be resolved. So what seems to be being pushed by the Republican House Speaker, the Republican Minority Leader in the House, and everybody from top to bottom within the Republican Party, it seems, is if you want Ukraine aid, you have to approve Republican priorities on the border. And so what is happening here is the Republican Party is deciding to bundle border funding and border issues with foreign aid. That is what they're saying they're going to do, or that is at least what the point they're trying to drive home here. Now, this is particularly interesting to me because when Mike Johnson was first elected, something he said that I thought was very interesting when the Biden administration tried to do a really big budget bill at the start of Mike Johnson's term, and then they ended up extending, etc., and going on and on and on, was that he wanted to vote for all of the pieces of legislation separately, that they wanted to fund the budget not through a bunch of bundled aid packages with a bunch of different disconnected issues are brought together, bundled together, and then voted on. What he wanted was to separate it all so they can cut out all the pork barrel politics, all that wasteful government spending, all these big projects that are bundled together just so they can get this vote here, get that vote there, and maybe money is passed in that process that isn't necessary for our budget when we have such a large deficit. That at least was the argument that was being made. That's what was being pushed when Mike Johnson first gets to office. Now, a month and a half later, a bunch of negotiations, an extension on budget talks, and what is happening as we approach 24 hours before the Senate vote on the aid package? Oh, let's bundle border. Let's bundle the border aid. Let's bundle the border aid. Let's bundle border policy with Ukraine aid and aid to Taiwan and aid to Israel. I already had a problem with all of the different foreign aid packages being bundled together. Somebody could be in favor of, for example, sending aid to Taiwan and Ukraine and not in favor of sending aid to Israel. Or somebody could be in favor of sending aid to Taiwan and Israel and not in favor of sending aid to Ukraine. Obviously, I'd be in favor of sending aid to Ukraine. Point is, though, I was already uncomfortable with all this being bundled together. But I understood that if the Israel aid was going to be passing anyway, then maybe you can try to attach something to it that is worthwhile. That at least is the logic that I was working under. But now, after complaining so much about it at the start of Mike Johnson's term, he seems to be completely 180'd on bundling. He seems to be completely on board with bundling. And I just thought that was very interesting after that early stance. This has gotten a response from Senator Schumer that I wanted to play, where he was kind of taken aback at this strategy that the Republicans are pushing forward. Look, I am perfectly fine with there being a vote on border policy in the House and Senate. I'm perfectly fine with there being debates on this. I'm perfectly fine with looking at Republican policy. I think most people are perfectly fine with that in the House and the Senate. But if you're going to complain about bundling legislation that are not connected, you cannot then immediately bundle legislation that is not connected. People illegally crossing the border across in the south of the country across the southern border is not the same as bombs and tanks and planes going across the Ukrainian border on the border with NATO, which we have a defensive pact with. The interests here, the responses here, the policies here, the people involved, everything is different. If you're going to complain about it all being bundled, then don't bundle. Don't be like, I hate the bundling is evil, and then bundling first opportunity you can. Anyway, Schumer decided to respond to this, and he said, look, we can do stuff on the border. I will give you guys a period to do amendments. You can try to get 10 Democratic votes in the Senate to get it through, but that they are very uncomfortable sending the president of tying border funding or border policy or moving of border policy with foreign aid, with supplemental aid to our allies. Let's listen to what Schumer had to say.
On the supplemental, let me go over where we're at and what we're doing. I'll give you a little background. Two things happened Thursday and Friday that changed things a great deal. On Thursday, Speaker Johnson called me up and said that he could only do Ukraine as long as H.R. 2 was attached to it. Immediately, I told him that's a non-starter. You know that we wouldn't even bring it to the floor of the Senate. You know that it has every Democrat voted against it, so bringing it to the floor of the Senate again makes no sense. When the debt ceiling occurred, we all voted no. And you know that you couldn't even pass it in the House, I said to him, because you need a bunch of Democrats, because there are a whole bunch of Republicans who won't vote for anything for Ukraine, no matter what is attached to it. And you won't get Democrats if you put H.R. 2 on the.
That's the thing that gets me too, is that the people who are going to be the loudest for trying to tie border funding and border policy to Ukraine aid are also going to be the people that, if this concession is given, are not going to vote in favor of it anyway because of the Ukraine aid.
The bill. He told me he had told this to Leader McConnell and to Leader Jeffries. Okay. Second, on Friday evening, the negotiations between Senators Sinema, Murphy, and Langford took a terrible turn. Basically, even though Senator Langford put on the table proposals that pretty much mirrored H.R. 2, which was a non-starter.
People were saying the video's not loud enough. Okay, I'll see if I can get it louder. 1 second.
And both Murphy and Sinema were just, very, they were surprised and very much saddened by what he did. Morally corrupt, and so we were at an impasse. But
hey, Gappy, thanks for the sub. What did you write? You wrote, contributing to your George Santos cameo fund. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I do want a George Santos cameo. I wanted to promote the channel.
We must get aid to Ukraine, and so we cannot wait. And so what I am proposing is the following. First, I will put on the floor of the Senate the president's bill, It will have 3 additions to it, but none of them that affect Ukraine at all. One is the fentanyl proposal that passed out of Banking Committee 23-0 and was supported by Senators Brown and Scott, the chair and ranking member of the committee. This will greatly stop the flow of fentanyl coming in to the United States. Second, we would put $1 billion in for the nonprofit security grants. There was $310 million last year. It's a program I helped originate. But the amount of damage and desecration, particularly to synagogues and mosques, has been huge, so we need a significant increase. And third, a COFA proposal to deal with the Pacific Islands, unrelated to this. But I will also do one more thing. I will offer the Republicans the First Amendment if we move forward on border, on immigration.
The First Amendment.
TBTA
Wowza.
Tier 1 subscription. Asterisk Saratriat asterisk gave asterisk cap TBT asterisk a Tier 1 asterisk subscription.
Asterisks.
They can put whatever they want. We think there are good proposals on border in the president's bill that do a lot, and adding fentanyl does even more. But if they think it's not enough, I will not interfere with them drawing up an amendment, but it will need 60 votes, like any amendment would. Let's remember here, it was the Republicans who put border on the table.
True.
We did not. They have a responsibility. If they believe border should be part of Ukraine, which is so vital to our country, let them propose an amendment that can get 60 votes. And that's why I hope they will vote on the motion to proceed, because I am giving them this new opportunity to put any amendment they want on the floor.
Well, the problem is what they want to pass, right, was voted against by all Democrats. And so they're not going to get that through. It's going to fail. And so what the Republicans would need to do to take this up by their offer is compromise enough or get something much, 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 much smaller through as an amendment if they can get 10 Democrats to vote for it, which is going to be a task and take compromise that I doubt the people who are pushing this whole effort in the first place would be willing to take. So, I mean, the odds of this succeeding are not high. So I'm being told to do stuff off stream. Smuggling weapons is a busy, busy industry. Do-do-do-do. Okay, where was I? We were listening to this guy, right? We were listening to Chuck Schumer. Was I in the middle of a point before I was interrupted? Meemaw needs help? Nah, not Meemaw. Where was it? Oh yes, let's finish this interaction with Chuck Schumer.
And if it will have to get a good number of Democratic votes, it can't be.
Oh, but yeah, no, the odds of it succeeding are like next to nothing. I mean, I have an extremely low estimation of the Republicans that they're trying to sway here. I don't think they're willing to compromise. A lot of these are podcast Republicans. These are people that I think mostly get glorification by making a mighty stand, creating a martyr out of themselves, going up there and taking the most radical position and being able to sniff their own farts about how principled they are, not getting anything that could actually get compromised with, that could actually get through compromise, because again, Democrats control the Senate and the presidency. They control 2 chambers.
We said it's had to be significantly bipartisan. That doesn't mean 1 or 2 Democrats. That means they got to get at least 11 to get to 60. If they can't meet that offer, then what's going on? Then what we should be doing is just voting on Ukraine alone.
True.
Many Republican members say they want to do Ukraine. If they themselves can't put a border amendment that would pass, then what the heck are we doing? Let's remember three things as we move forward. One, how important Ukraine is. It's a turning point in Western civilization. This is a historic moment, and this cannot be delayed any longer. Zelensky, by the way, could not make it to something happened at the last minute to our briefing at 3, but we'll hear, and you'll hear particularly from Mark Warner, who knows this so well, how desperate Ukraine is for the aid that the president has proposed. But it's vital, vital. Second, if this fails because of border, that's not a bipartisan failure. That's a failure of the Republicans and the Republican leadership. The only reason they added border was because a lot of members of their hard right said they want border. But a lot of those same members aren't going to vote Ukraine no matter what is there.
True.
The Republican leadership went along.
He's spitting facts.
Well, let's see if they can put something together. But if they can't, because Ukraine is so important, we should just move forward with Ukraine. Plain and simple. And this is a very generous offer. We're letting the Republicans craft the amendment they say they so desperately need to get Ukraine money done, and we hope very much that they will take us up on this offer and put an amendment on the floor, again, which I will not interfere with. They'll just have to get 60 votes.
Damn. And they probably will not. But I do want to play one last message. This is from Jake Sullivan. This is RNC Research trying to dunk the Biden administration on Ukraine aid. Because now the Republicans are going to all vote against the aid, and they're trying to somehow paint the Biden administration as the bad guys here after they're trying to bundle in a totally unrelated issue with Ukraine aid and trying to make it sound like it's the same issue. And so obviously reporters are going to be asking Jake Sullivan and other national security people about what's going on with the aid votes. And one of the questions that was proposed to them by a conservative interviewer was, are you saying that any member of Congress that votes against aid to Ukraine is voting for Putin? And RNC Research's summation of what Jake Sullivan said was pretty much, but listen to what Jake Sullivan said here.
Saying that any member of Congress who votes against aid to Ukraine is voting for Putin?
I believe that any member of Congress who does not support funding for Ukraine is voting for an outcome that will make it easier for Putin to prevail. That is, a vote against supporting Ukraine is a vote to improve Putin's strategic position. That's just an inescapable reality. That's not speaking to someone's motive, why they chose to vote against it. That's just speaking to the outcome of their vote. A vote against supplemental funding for Ukraine will hurt Ukraine and help Russia. It will hurt democracy and help dictators. And we think that that is not the right lesson of history, and that every member, Democrat and Republican, should vote to support this.
Wow, that was a lot more nuance than they wanted to fit in this tweet. He doesn't say that voting against Ukraine aid is a vote for Putin. He said that voting against Ukraine aid is going to help Putin and is going to hurt Ukraine and is going to hurt the fight against Russia's invasion into Ukraine, which is absolutely true. And people can try to paint it any which way they want, try to make it look like the Democrats were unreasonable on border issues, or try to paint any number of reasons as to why the aid is likely going to fail tomorrow, and then they're going to have to kick back negotiations for another month or two as they find a new package that's going to be workable. It's not because the Democrats are breaking some tradition of border funding tied to foreign aid or military aid. They're not breaking line with some prearranged agreement between the Republicans and the Democrats on how aid to Ukraine was going to be done. It is that the RNC is currently facing a civil war, and in that civil war, they are having a lot of friendly fire going on. And Mike Johnson, their new House Speaker, is in an extremely precarious political position where he needs to keep a lot of people, many of whom hate each other, constantly fight and would like to tear their throat out of each other. He needs to keep them together. And in order to keep some of the most rowdy members of the House together, the same ones that sabotaged Kevin McCarthy, in order to keep them in line, he has to appease to a more radical anti-Ukraine agenda. even if not everybody in the Republican Party agrees with that anti-Ukraine agenda. He at least needs to appease it. And even if at the end of the day, they end up passing aid a month from now or 2 months from now, this delay is having an impact. It stops the Ukrainians from planning around Ukraine aid. Other European powers, which the American government is trying to encourage to give more to support Ukraine as we try to support more European defense integration, they are taking signals from the White House and from America's Congress on if America is going to stay in the fight. Because if they think America isn't going to stay in the fight, how can they hope to, with 1/100th of the economy of the United States, or at best 1/30th of the economy of the United States, how are they going to hope to beat back the Russians if the Americans thought, it's a lost cause? This isn't just something you can put off endlessly. It doesn't have a time limit on it. The clock is racing, man. People are dying. The war is continuing. The fighting is happening. The casualty numbers we're getting from the front right now, the Russians are engaged in massive offensives around Avdiivka. They're taking heavy losses when it comes to armored vehicles, heavy losses when it comes to their assault teams, heavy losses when it comes to just about everything. But the Ukrainians are taking losses in that process as well. And if they are going to continue to hold the line or ever begin to push back to take back more territory, foreign aid is going to be a vital part of that equation.